Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This week we have on one of my very good friends. Her name is Alex, and she currently is living in Portland, Oregon. Alex and I actually went to school together for a few years down in Tucson at the University of Arizona, and we were actually in the same sorority together. And we have her on today just to discuss pretty much just life in general, I would say, but more so just college, relationships, perspectives, and how everything kind of changes when you go from being in high school to college and then back again with, I guess this thing that we're now in called life. So, Alex, why don't you come on and just give the people a brief little synopsis on you?
Hello, everybody. I'd like to say this is my first time out here on this podcast or any podcast of any sort. So I'm super excited. A little bit about me. My parents immigrated from Russia to Canada, and then they had me, my sisters are way older. So I was kind of like I like to call like myself a happy immigration baby. So after, I was born, 24 years ago, we spent some time in Canada, but after 2 years, we moved to Florida. Then I lived in Florida for a little bit. Then we moved to Idaho. And then now in Oregon for like, the last 10-ish years. So I now call Portland, Oregon my home, even though I'm still a Canadian citizen. On my long list of things to do, become a US citizen, just just one of those things. Haven't gotten around to it yet. Me.
At what point did you move from Canada to America?
I think I was about like a year and a half or 2 years, like still pretty young. We just moved around because my dad had a job, and because we weren't US citizens, we had to follow wherever the job took us. So we moved around a lot. Um, like our, I just remember like growing up in like our house, we could move the next day if we wanted to. There's nothing really on the walls, just the basics of the furniture were up, just so we could quickly pack up and move if we needed to.
Okay, so you were always kind of moving around. Do you think that
Mm.
affected how you just viewed everything by constantly having to be like, maybe not fully unpacked or living somewhere permanently?
Yeah, I think also it goes into like my fight or flight mode. Like when I don't like something or if I feel uncomfortable, first idea in my head is like, you need to physically move. You need to move to a new apartment and it'll fix like your all your problems. It doesn't have to be like a new city or anything. It can do with like the where I'm living. So I think it's comforting for me to keep moving locations because I haven't stayed in one spot. But I do get attached to things very easily, like locations and physical objects, even though I moved around a lot.
Do you think that influenced your decision to go from the Northwest all the way down to Arizona for college? Like, what made you choose to go that far away from home?
I never been to Arizona before I applied. Like the first day in Arizona was orientation for me. And I just never visited. The reason why I wanted to go and live far away was again, some things were bothering me at home, like a high school boyfriend that like basically, just like in Arizona, you either go to U of A or ASU. It's almost like the high schools are divided. Like it's just like people know what school they're going to the day like they enter middle school. I just freshly moved in. It was either University of Oregon or OSU, and I couldn't see myself being with the people that I grew up with in high school. Like I kind of wanted a fresh start, and I do better in situations where I don't know anybody, and I just have to like make new friends and relationships, and that's why I joined a sorority as well.
So you mentioned part of the reason you wanted to go all the way down to Arizona was because you were maybe not loving your time in Oregon or certain people or relationships were, I guess, influencing you. Was there something specific other than just wanting to get all the way like somewhere completely new where you had never been before that made you pick U of A?
Oh, that decision came down to my grades because in high school I had a lot of anxiety and depression, and that impacted my grades, definitely my junior and senior year. That plummeted my chances into getting into a school. So, of course, U of A had a low acceptance, well, high. They took pretty much everybody, and the fact that I was out of state, they were like, "Oh, money," like, which retrospect, dumb decision, past me shouldn't have spent that much money. But I don't regret like my friend experiences and experiences of being on my own for the first time of, trying to be an adult. But I do wish sometimes I went like differently about it just to save my parents money.
Yeah. It's always hard going out of state. That's why I was thankful that my entire family followed me to Arizona so that I could kind of get that in-state tuition, but with an out-of-state experience. But do you think like I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Your high school relationships and friendships, like was it hard for you to leave that all behind and go somewhere completely different, or were you kind of looking for that fresh start that I think so many people are looking for when they, leave high school and are kind of entering this new world?
I I didn't feel scared or regretful leaving like those friendships because I had one other friend that also went out of state. I think it would have been different if I was the only one going out because then I would have had some serious FOMO if like all my friends were back home. But she went to Utah, so I felt like I wasn't alone in my experiences of going out of state.
So going to U of A was basically like a new start for you, like a fresh, clean slate for you to meet all new people.
Yeah, I always feel like it's easy, like, well, now I understand like relationships now, but that just seemed like the only option, one, to get into school because where I transferred to, I was embarrassed to go to Portland State University because it was kind of like I felt like it was kind of school that was just like, oh, super basic. Like, I'm not going to get the college experience. But the thing is, I've got my college experience at U of A, and that came with an amazing time, trauma, a whole lot of trauma at U of A, um, and other things. Like, I don't think I can ever go back to Tucson.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, two sounds a little bit much, but I guess now if we transition into like your actual experience down at U of A, like what were some of the things that you saw change in yourself from, the high school version of you now entering this giant university that's kind of known to be a party school. People are kind of known to be, I guess, more attractive is what people say, and just that party atmosphere mixed with how close everyone is. Like the school itself, you can walk from one end to another in less than 20 minutes, whereas a school maybe in Portland would take, getting on a
Mhm.
bus or something like that. So I feel like the fact that everything was so close together added another level of that, and also just being in a sorority and having all the pressures that come with that, I know it definitely impacted me and my experience. So how do you think it started for you when you first got there as a freshman?
I definitely like over the span of my freshman year, I think I gained confidence, even though my body issue, like not body issues, body confidence maybe declined. Something that was just like when I look back and reflect, I'm like, oh, all we did was talk about other people and talk badly about our own self and our bodies. And I was constantly comparing myself, which isn't very an enriching environment for somebody who out of state, young, that leaves an impression on you. But overall, I think it gave me the opportunity to become an adult and make my own choices. Um, and because it was such a small community, I think that was, well, small-ish. It still was a big school, but the fact that it was all campus located, that gave me an opportunity to get like almost like a dip into adult life without having to deal with the outside population. Because mostly dealing with college kids was fine, but like there wasn't a lot of like outside static of like real world at U of A. It was a bubble for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely a bubble, and I don't think a lot of us realized it until we left the bubble. But to touch on what you
Hmm.
said, it's so true because it's like so many people went to that school and walking around in a place where people are walking to pool parties. For those that don't know, like people will just go out in like a thong bikini, walking around the streets, and you're seeing all of these very, young women, like men too, who just have like these six-pack abs. And we're constantly just kind of like discussing other people. And when you look back at it, it's pretty messed up. And we're constantly like comparing each other and, the sororities, the fraternities, just people in our classes. And I
Yeah,
feel like it created such a toxic environment to the point where that's all anyone could ever talk about. And I know it affected me, but how do you think that affected you in like totality?
I think, well, one thing I really didn't like was people, like, based on what sorority I was in, they looked at me whether I was high or low. Or like people would be like, "Oh, you're kind of hot. You're kind of too hot to be in that sorority," or like, "Oh, like there's a bunch of stigmas that come with that label." And when you look at it on a level, everybody is this freaking same. Like we were all the same, but we had different social statuses based on who we were. And it felt like we had a community, but we were also so alone. Like our circle was very limited, and that friend circle didn't change. Like if I imagine myself, if I stayed there for the full 4 years, my friend group wouldn't have changed me, like, at all. Maybe one or two people because I moved, but I would have had stayed the consistent of like same group of friends, which not really who I am or what I wanted to do when I came to U of A. I wanted a bunch of different friend groups from all different areas because I think that's what enriches my life and other people's lives.
Right. And you were only there for 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
You trans.
Yeah. Things kind of went downhill when I got my MIP and MIC with my fake ID. My parents were, I just felt so guilty and they were paying, and then I missed my court date. And I remember I took my roommate's car, and for some reason, like always when I'm emotional, my first plan in my head is like, you should go eat. Like that's gonna fix like all the anger and hangry anxiety that you're feeling. So I went to the best breakfast place I know, super bougie, um, and just sobbed in a public place just eating because I was like, I know this is gonna make me feel better, but I don't know where I need to be right now. But then that made me had to stay that extra year and a half. I think it was a year and a half because I left in December. Because then I had to go to court or whatever. So dramatic. That time there, I felt like I lived a full 4 years because you're going out Monday, Tuesday, when there was no day of the week that you stayed at home. And if you were at a quote kickback. I don't like that word anymore. Kickback at somebody else's place. So it was, I'm glad I thrive off of social situations. My social battery doesn't really deplete. But at the same time, it's not really good for my body, my well being, and my schoolwork.
Wow, I didn't realize you missed your court date. That's well, I just remember so many people would get those like minor in possession things. I never got one. I also turned 21 like right after freshman
You
year, so
did.
I didn't have as much of a chance to get one, but I remember it just being such a casual thing that like so many people be like, "Oh yeah, I got one." Like gotta go to court for like a hot minute and pay a fine, but it's
I
traumatic.
know. Oh my God. Well, the thing is, I went to court and they said, and my full name is Alexandra Maria Mazarenko. And when I went to court, they said Alejandro Maria Mazarenko. And they said it in an accent. And then there I am, sorority girl, stood up in court, and the most, what's the word for not revealing, like modest dress,
Mhm.
still was like mid thigh dress. Just had my shoulders covered. It was backless, like the best thing. And I just stood up, definitely not an Alejandro. Um, and it was the
Um,
most weirdest thing. And now I look back, yeah, they wrote my name wrong, and I probably couldn't. Didn't have to pay the fine, honestly, because they got the wrong
because they wrote your name.
person, and then they chart. They wrote my name wrong, and then they charged me that my name was wrong.
That's not your fault.
I anyways, but like when you're younger, it's like, I don't know, just like shut up and just take my money. Like just don't get it on my record.
That's so funny. I can totally just see you like at a restaurant, like, can I get some French fries? And you're just like sobbing.
I publicly cry often. I just go into survival mode and I'm like, okay, what's the game plan? I need water, I need to eat food. And for some reason, it's always happens to be a super public area. Like it's not like a Starbucks, like where I can quickly grab something and go cry somewhere else. I'm like, no, I need to like sit down and eat something good.
That's so funny because I'm like the total opposite. I refuse to show any emotion ever in any public circumstance. If I'm going to cry, it's going to be by myself in the shower where no one can hear me and I have a full like pre-game playlist going of people like screaming rap music so that no one can hear me.
Oh my God. It doesn't matter where I am. I'll let out a couple tears.
That's probably healthier because you're just like letting it all flow when it needs to. And I'm just like, I need to wait a few hours until I'm home alone."
Yeah. Wow.
I was gonna say, going back to the fact that you feel like you got a full college experience or like at least like a full U of A experience in 2 years, I think is so true because by the time I got to my senior year, I was like
Hmm.
fully done with the college life. I was no longer trying to go out like five
Hmm.
times a week. I didn't really care so much about doing all the like sorority sanctioned events. Like I was so focused on just like kind of getting out of there and like
Yep.
starting this new life because honestly 4 years is a really long time and after I would agree with you after like 2 years of that it was a lot and I was lucky enough to kind of go outside of our little circle that we had when you were there and
Hmm.
like I was in different clubs and I like met different people
So
so I kind
cool.
of had those outer circles where I could go when I was feeling like all that pressure of people kind of talking toxic about each other but I can't even
Hmm.
imagine what would have happened to me if I had only stuck with those same core people I met freshman year.
Yeah. I do sometimes like wish I stayed, but again, I was so heavily influenced by the people around me where, after 2 years, I was like looking at the people like, oh, they're gonna continue to keep up this drinking and drug lifestyle, mm, for the next 2 years. And I was like, I want to give a damn about my education and I want to feel enriched. And I just didn't get that. But I really wish I joined like clubs or like did that kind of thing. And I was super paranoid about getting an MIP and MIC after that because if you get it again on your record, then it stays.
Yeah, we'll get into you post Arizona life, but
Hmm.
while you were still in Arizona, was there anything else that happened to you that you saw as, I don't want to say like traumatic, but that you noticed was just
Hmm.
kind of toxic or something you realized didn't really fit your lifestyle or the way that you want to live after maybe you had experienced it for a while? I know we touched on like just partying and people
Hmm.
talking toxic about each other, but I feel like there were just so many things that happened that we kind of all just like blacked out, not intentionally from alcohol, but just because we don't
Hmm.
want to think about it.
Yeah, I think it was definitely this toxic culture of the men. I don't, the boys, they're not even men. The boys at U of A, they were just felt like they were on top of the world and didn't respect women's boundaries. And, there was a lot of times where, that time that when we were at an event and this guy he started to get really physical and angry at whoever she was, his girlfriend. And I stepped in between and then he tried to raise his hand at me. And I was like, well, you know what? Do it, punch me. I dare you. And then I just remember just calling him weak and things like that. I think I started to notice more of that disrespect, trigger warning, but the sexual assault and all those things are very high at U of A, and the fact that the police and the entire community um, didn't give support for those who been assaulted was scary. It was just it was so normalized. You would sit down with your friends and say, oh, like this guy, like he did this, this, and that, all those terrible things that you say no to, but they keep pushing you. And they're like, oh my gosh, that happened to me too. And then you notice it's the same kind of guy, group of guys. And it wasn't like an immediate thing. I thought it was normal too at the time. But over time, when something like that kind of happens to you or happens frequently and nobody's bringing attention to it, like, oh, that's just normal, it starts to really ring on you in different ways, like performing in school or keeping relationships or respect for yourself. It really shows.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I remember when that incident happened when you and I we were just at a frat party together, and all of a sudden that man was just getting a little, I don't know if he was just really drunk or they were fighting with his girlfriend, but when you
Yeah.
stepped in like that, I was honestly in shock because I feel like most people usually like they want to get away from that. They don't want to be involved in it, but you were like so opposite of I'm not going to let this dude, treat this girl. Doesn't really matter what she did to him. Like you should not be
Mm.
that physical with any woman ever. And I remember being like, Alex, let's go home, please. And you're like, no, like this is not okay. And then I do remember you getting like very visibly upset. And then that's kind of when I said to myself, like, well, why am I not like behind
Mhm.
Alex, like doing the same thing? And I feel like I just didn't really think about it at the time. And I was just overwhelmed and shocked. But the fact that I had like a flight reaction and you had like a fight reaction really shows like how prominent that was. And I mean, I'm lucky that I haven't had like any serious issues with men, at least up to that point, happen to me. But I feel like
Mhm.
for you, like, was there anything that had happened to you previously, maybe not even you or just like a friend that really caused that like emotional reaction that, made you step in like that?
Yeah, it was the reason why I moved out of the dorms. There was a guy, and I really wanted to be. It was kind of like a co-ed dorm where we had two halls for girls, and the last hall was the guys' hall. And I my roommate and I really wanted to like get close to these guys because that's just fun, like having friendships. And this one guy came on. I think we go into my dorm room, we start kissing, and then we go on in my bed, and the next thing I know, he's choking me. And but it was like a little bit more than like a pleasing way. And I wanted him to stop, but so then I look away, but then he starts going harder, and I was like, oh, and he wouldn't stop until I called him daddy. I had to look him in the eyes and call him daddy, or he wouldn't stop choking me.
What the heck?
I thought after that all happened, I thought it was my fault that, oh, I shouldn't have, let him in. But no, it wasn't. And he did it two times. The second time he stood outside my door for days saying, Alex, Alex, like let me in. Like, why won't you let me in? And like obviously I'm not gonna be like, well, you choked me. And then he did it the second time and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna let him do that again. Like I'm not gonna look him in the eye and call him daddy. So I just look away again. And then he kept pushing harder. I just felt like the blood just and no air started to go to my head. And I was like, I'm gonna pass out. And then I had to call him daddy. But like after that experience, um, I was definitely I kept feeling like, why am I feeling this way? Like, why am I shaken up about it? Like, it's not that bad. Because I remember telling somebody else about this, and they're like, oh my God, that's so weird. Like, not like, are you okay? Like, do you need support? Like, maybe we should go to the health center. Like, it's funny to say like it now, but at the same time, it's like not, I don't know. I wish I could have like guided the mental health side of things for my younger self at that point. Because after that, I definitely that didn't stop me from wanting to be with guys. Like I almost just wanted to redeem myself and just kept going. Like at the end of the night, I was just like, my goal is to like kiss or dance with a guy. Like that's the goal. Like I want a guy's attention so badly. And that was such a weird way of like starting off the night like that. It should have been like, oh, I can't wait to go dance with my friends. And no, it's I I really want this guy's attention. I don't care who it is. I want it. And but going back to standing up for that girl, I think I gained a lot of confidence because I punched a dude in high school for disrespecting me. I kind of felt on top of the world after that, where I was like, I'm kind of ready to do it again. I was like, let's see somebody try to challenge me again. I'm ready to fight.
Oh my gosh. Well, one, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I feel like people hear stories like that and they think that just because it wasn't something more serious, like an
Hmm.
actual like sexual assault, like penetration type of thing, that it's really not a
Hmm.
big deal, even though that's terrifying and I would probably never talk to a man again. But
Hmm.
that is, I mean, I can now see why you acted in that way when that man was getting physical. And I think your point of how you kind of transitioned from that happened to me and now I need to like almost redeem myself in my own head. So I need to go find a guy to give me attention that's, not gonna choke me so that I know that it's
Yeah.
fault. But it's like it was obviously never your fault. And that guy had some serious kink type of issues, but
Yeah.
it's sad that we as women like immediately blame ourselves and that you had to like kind of go out and try to, find some other dude who probably was also not a great guy just to make yourself
Mm-mm.
feel better.
Was quite the experience. And then after that, I actually used that to get out of the dorm. I honestly, even though it happened, I should have stayed in the dorm. Because moving into an apartment too early was isolating within itself. It was way too early to be on my own. Like a dorm is like dipping your toe into reality. But it just felt like summer camp. And um, I think, if I would give a tip to any person who's going to college, it's like, I want to live in an apartment. Don't do it. Go live in the dorm. Like, yeah, you may have like a crappy roommate experience, but at least you can tell that story later, you know. Um, but an apartment, no, for your first year, it's not worth it.
Well, that's a traumatic story. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm sure a lot of other girls out there, whether you're in high school, college, or out of college, just knowing that it's not your fault and no
Mm-hmm.
matter how you go about fixing it, I think it's important to know that it's never our fault. And whether you need to talk to a therapist, an adult, or just a friend, whatever you need to do to kind of get yourself out of that mindset. Alex is actually in a very serious long-term relationship with a guy that, I mean, we're all assuming you guys are getting married at some point sometime soon. I guess to just transition from, you said you started in high school trying to get away from a guy, going to college at U of A where there were so many toxic,
Mhm.
kind of had a terrible experience with that one guy, and now you're in a very healthy and serious relationship. So kind of just take us through that and I guess like how you feel now compared to all that you've been through.
I think now, like this relationship, I feel respected in, and I feel equal. But I also feel like everything that I say has value, and he hears me. Respects my boundaries as well. We are going on four, 4 years, 4 plus. I don't know. We're definitely going on a five now. But we've lived together for about 2 years now. The way we met was I have actually known him since high school. And he just was this hot baseball player that like I just remember looking at his Instagram and be like, oh my God, he's so cute. Um, and like sending like screenshots to my friends. Like sometimes we'd see him, but we never hung out one on one. And we were two kids. He lived in like inner city Portland. I lived on the suburbs. So we both didn't drive. So getting to each other like would have had one of us would have had to like put themselves out there, which there was no way we were doing that at like 17 years old. Um, so, we went our own ways. And I remember I was going back to the U of A and he was in Phoenix for spring training. And we just started Snapchatting. We Snapchatted every day up until I moved back. And I remember the night that we were supposed to hang out, I was talking to my friend, like, I was like, I don't know if I can do it. Like, I'm so anxious to hang out with him. Like, I don't know what we're going to do. He does come over, um, and he has dinner with my parents and I, and
Wow.
then, and my parents at the time made their own wine, and we got too drunk, and then he couldn't drive home, so he had a sleepover. So it was like the first time we like hung out was really at my parents' house. It was like we hung out before, like with some friends and stuff. So at least like it wasn't like the icebreaker. But it was the first time we hung out, like just the two of us.
What a
And
crazy first date.
yeah, I sometimes I'm like thinking like, oh, I wish we had like a formal first date, but I was like, we knew each other. I think if it's too serious sometimes to go on a date, but after that we definitely went on like a formal date to like this Italian restaurant, which was a lot of fun. Oh, we did long distance. So he played rugby at U of O and I was living at home. So the first year of a relationship, he would come down every weekend. He didn't have a game to see me. And then once I got the confidence to drive and to visit, I went and visited him every weekend. So,
That's beautiful. Like, what do you think? How was it like going from the toxic environment of our college to
mhm.
having this guy who's, like you said, just respectful and like sees you as an equal and is like actually doing normal things like being with your family and stuff like that? Like, was that a weird thing for you to witness and go through, or did it just kind of come super naturally?
It was really difficult because I kept thinking he doesn't like me. He doesn't like me because he was respecting me and I wasn't used to that. And I was like, multiple times in our relationship, I was like, do you, do you even like me? Like, it's like, of course. And I was like, oh, that just looks really different from, let's say, the toxic things. And I didn't really understand when he's like, oh, I'm respecting your boundaries, or, I'm going off of what your body's telling me too. Like, like a lot of times I just look tense all the time. um, but after that, like it took me some time, like, oh, I can communicate when I want like affection, like holding hands or kissing. The other things, like I can be the one that initiates it. And that was quite the learning curve of just not being what it used to be.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
took some time.
you having had guys treat you in a way where they think, it's appropriate to choke you until you literally can't
Mhm.
breathe, or just like the men at U of A being very aggressive and forthcoming with, their advances. And all of a sudden you have this guy that's taking a step back and is really kind of allowing you to like make those
It
choices.
was so hard.
It is kind of like a total like it's just it messes with your mind because you're like, I've never experienced this. And I think part of you is like, well, I know this is good, but I'm also questioning everything. And it's sad
Hmm.
because guys are the ones that like do this to us and like mess with our heads. And then
Hmm.
people say like, oh, you finally meet a good guy. And it's like usually like we're the ones that will end up ruining it because we don't know how to be treated that way. But luckily
That's
that
so
didn't
true.
happen.
It was quite the learning curve, but I think also he's really good at communicating. And sometimes, like through my own trauma, don't realize that he's literally voicing what he needs, or like when he needs space. Because in my wounded self, I'm thinking, oh, he doesn't love me. He's not doing this. But in fact, he's loving me because he's communicating me that he needs space or he wants attention. And it was really interesting to, I mean, like I still deal with it. I don't think, it's always not a learning curve, but you're always trying to do better in the way that you communicate. And I do think that is key in a relationship.
Is it weird for you to look back now and think about just, I guess, how far you've come in terms of, thinking this is my fault that this guy did this to me, and now you're in a 4 or 5 plus year relationship that's literally the most nicest, like healthiest thing you've ever been in? Is it just like
Hmm.
it's probably so satisfying to see how far you've come from, going out just looking for male attention, and now it's like the only thing you really focus on is yourself and, your
Hmm.
partner.
I never really noticed it until, talking about it with my friends and you. Like, I think I'm still looking at that trauma, like, still processing it. Because I was looking at a diary and I was like, reading the things I was going through, and sometimes I have flashbacks too about it that trigger me, but knowing that I am safe, well, trying to remind myself that I am safe is still a curve. But like sometimes like when I'm thinking positively, I've been doing a new thing where I pat myself on the back and say good job because I'm like, okay, no, you did good. You're like, you've made it, you did good. Um, but looking back, like I sometimes I just wish I could just write a letter to my old self and be like, here are the rules and the guidelines and what the next 5 years is going to look for you because I didn't know it was going to look like this. And I'm really proud of myself because it could have gone, I still could have been seeking that attention to this day. And that's not a good look. And that's what I've also learned from your podcast. Finding confidence in yourself and being happy is is the mindset right now.
Yeah, I think to talk on what you just said, it's like, I don't want to say it's like a terrible thing if you're a girl and you're only going out looking for
Mhm.
male validation. But I think if every single time you're going to a bar or a frat party or whatever event, and that's your only sole priority, then I think maybe we should all take a step. And like you said, like you had to come to terms with why you were doing that. And I think some people may not even know the reason or the trauma
Mhm.
that caused them to be seeking that. And I'm not saying like don't go out looking for a good time with a guy, but
Yeah.
don't make it every time and start to take those steps towards loving yourself more, because usually that's the reason why we are going out, is because we're missing some sort of validation, and a lot of us don't know how to give it to ourselves, and it's something
Mhm.
you have to learn, and luckily you are able to process and get over that.
I just remember like throughout the night, like your standards keep getting lower and lower the more you drink. And not just because like you have different goggles on, but nothing good happens after midnight or 2 a.m. Like you're at the bottom of the barrel, like it's not worth it. But
Mhm.
if you go for it again, not saying how to live your life, but again, have like a reality check like once in a while of being like, am I doing good? How's my mental health? Am I taking care of myself? I am sick, go for it. But if there's some aspects in your life that you need some fixing, like making sure you're eating enough in the day, a lot of us aren't. Even though you think you're eating, you gotta be eating, drinking water, taking care of yourself. Those are just my priorities and checking in with myself.
Good. I think, yeah, we all need to kind of do that reality check of like, well, how am I doing? Am I going out every night? Am I going and, getting my steps in, or going to the gym ever?
Hmm.
And I think those little things kind of do keep us in check. Can I ask how, as I feel like a lot of people don't know how to do this, and I don't even know if I would know how to do this, but how did you communicate with your boyfriend now, like the things you had been through and those more like traumatic events, so that he kind of understood your headspace, and knowing obviously not to behave like that ever with you, but just so that he was
Hmm.
kind of, I feel like a lot of girls are like, I don't want them to know, they're gonna think I'm damaged, they're gonna think they can't do anything
Hmm.
to me. But in the end, it's only gonna hinder you if your partner is unaware of what you've been through. So how did you go about,
Exactly.
doing that with him?
I'd say the way that I did it wasn't the most healthiest of ways. A lot of that came out when I was drunk. And a lot of times when we were out on the town, like I think I remember myself getting triggered, and I'm not one to hide my feelings. I mean, like, God, I can cry in public. I am not one to hide my feelings, and I'm having a bad time just by the way my body is. And me thinking he knows me really well when obviously I just look like a troll when I'm upset, but I would just emotionally drop when I was like drunk. So he found out through that way of just kind of my reaction to something, and he'd be like, "That's a little strange. Like, why is that?" But I don't think I went over like every trauma in my life, but the big one, the big ones, and even the way of like holding me, like, he's known me throughout the years, and I've definitely loosened up a lot and trust him. That was a big thing was I put up a guard like, oh, this is a brand new relationship. Like you said, like, let's forget about it. But that stuff carries with you. And especially in like relationships and somebody getting to know you is you don't have to get into the details of things, but you can just phrase it in the way of like boundaries. Like, I don't like being choked during sex. XYZ, the story, like there's, like little things like that. But I definitely feel like I could have done better in not emotionally dumping my traumas, especially it just happened when we were drinking, which is never a good idea, you know?
Yeah, I think it's, a perfect scenario if you're able to sit down with someone and look them in the eye and have like a
Mhm.
straight up conversation. But when you've been through something, it's not always the easiest thing to be like, hey, let's talk for an hour about this awful thing that happened to me. It's like
Yeah.
it might come out in a more, I guess, immature or just like being drunk, where it's just kind of coming out of you and you want to tell that person, but you don't know how to do it. So it's like, it's just kind of the easiest way. And obviously, I'm sure you wish you could go back and maybe do things a little bit
Hmm.
different. But I mean, clearly he handled it and you're still going strong.
Yeah. Yeah. He handled it really well. But I think like it takes like a lot of strength to like sit down. But also I don't want to like make it look like here are the rules, like here's the guidelines. Like at the end of the day, I have to work out my trauma. It's not his responsibility to help me through it. Like I'm not trying to tell him like, oh, I had this happen to me. Okay, like let's work through it. No, I I don't want that kind of it's not his responsibility. It's his responsibility to respect me if I communicate a boundary. But at that point in time, I didn't know what I needed.
Yeah, I mean, we're all still so young, and you were what, maybe like 22 at the time?
19. I think we started.
19.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, because it's like even though you did, tell him all of that and a trauma dumping type of way, obviously you probably wouldn't be doing that now if something happened to you, but it just shows how much, we change and we advance. And now the fact that you are and you have been with him for longer, you would, probably sit down with him and have an actual conversation about things. And had I been 19 and all of that had happened to me, I don't think I'd be able to sit down like I do today with guys and be like very straight up and just tell them how I'm feeling and be able to set that boundary. And it just really shows how far we've all come. And,
Hmm.
from high school through college, and, we're a few years out now. Like, I agree with you. Like, we should be giving ourselves a little pat on the back.
Hmm.
It's easy to be hard on yourself and look back at those times, but it's more beneficial to just think, well, I've
Hmm.
grown from it. If you were still going out with your boyfriend, screaming at him while you're drunk,
Hmm.
maybe I would say we should reevaluate. But
Definitely. I definitely think I also think it's always good to reflect, and like if you had like a journal back then, and I still need to work on journaling and getting my feelings out because like you said for like your first intro podcast, how you got your feelings out on the notes app, by like speaking out loud or writing down quickly like what you've been through. Kind of wish I did that. Like, especially for the moments, like those really high and heated moments in my life, like I would like to analyze it a little bit more because I'm sure like how it really happened is a little bit differently. as time goes on, but I just think documentation is good in that way to reflect.
Yeah, and it's hard to like look at something that had just happened to you. 'Cause I think a lot of us like, oh, this bad thing just happened. Like I want to immediately forget about it. And so
Hmm.
the act of journaling or like writing it in your notes or doing whatever can be like challenging because it's like, well, this is now documented. Like I can read exactly what I was feeling or thought. And you know what?
Hmm.
I never want to think about this thing again. So why would I
Hmm.
do that? So it's a conscious effort you have to make, but I think in the end, it's only going to help your mental health. And it's like one of the reasons why I started doing this. Like I'm not going to remember everything every little moment or how I was feeling like 20, 30 years from now, but having these little episodes, I can be like, wow, that's how I was feeling at 25 or that's
Yeah.
something I did and I'm sure I'll have feelings about it later in life that I do now, but I'll always have this to kind of look back on as like a little like
Yeah.
yearbook of audio.
I love it. I always keep thinking, this is something I'm working on. I keep thinking way too much about what's going to happen next. And in my own way, like that is creating anxiety within itself. Like I'm not living in the moment. And then when I finally do, like when I look back to those college days, I really miss it. Even though it was probably hella traumatic and had a lot of unresolved things going on, I still kind of miss it. Like, and I kept thinking like, oh, what's the next thing that's gonna happen? The next thing. And life is moving a little too fast for my comfort. Um, and I wanted to slow down, and I like these check-ins too.
Well, I think we're all kind of in that process of like, well, where am I going to be a year from now? Or what am I going to do next? And it's like, if you think back to where you were 5 years ago, like if I had told myself I'd be doing all these different things right now, I would be like, no, that's probably not going to happen. But like, I have no idea what I'll be doing. And it's like, just kind of take a minute and like live in the moment and live in the present because it's like they say, like, you're never really going to get this time back. So constantly worrying about the future, it's like you'll be where you are. Like, you're not leaving. Like, this is your life. So it's hard because I'm always like, well, when's my next relationship? Or, what career will
Hmm.
I be doing in 5 years? But it's like, let's just live in this I'm currently single, currently in this single life and be happy about it. And, all I really have to worry about is, okay, well, what am I going to podcast about next? Like, I don't worry about where I'm going to be living 5 years from now because I'll be doing it. I'll be living in that moment when it happens.
It's hard to do it.
It's
It's
very
super
hard.
hard, but we're doing it. But we're doing it. It's probably a lot better than it was 5 years ago. But we just keep getting better with age and life experiences and trying to navigate this. Also, our lives were put on hold because of the pandemic. Like that definitely, absolutely impacted our lives in a way. We're just trying to have a good time.
So, just to wrap this episode up, what are some of the takeaways you had, whether it be from U of A, from moving back home, just your new healthy life now? What are some things you'd say
Mhm.
you've learned that you'd like others to take away from this?
Um, Things take time, and as well as if you're more on my relationships with friends, like I didn't imagine that I would still be friends with some of my sorority sisters. Like the fact that we just had a little sister reunion, like I never thought I would have friends where I could check in like that, and still have relationships like that. Um, I am incredibly thankful that, you know, you guys are still some people, if I ever had an issue, I'd still hit up and I trust absolutely. And I always have a good time with. And I think, even though we don't see each other every day, you can still have a strong relationship with your friends and support them from afar. I think that was the takeaway. I really didn't see myself. I thought I would just like, again, just like how I moved to different locations, I thought it just cut ties after every time I move. But yeah, apparently it doesn't work like that. Friends can still be friends with you and come with you on the life journey, like, even though you move into a different direction and do things for yourself. Friends are going to support you.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't believe you thought that. I mean,
I was like, oh, why?
I've moved a lot too, and it's
Hmm.
hard. I actually have a whole episode that I
Oh,
recorded
good.
about it. You should
I'm
listen.
interested. Oh, of course.
Um, but
Unsubscribe.
it's very hard to keep those relationship ties with people that you're not seeing on a regular basis. And that's why it was so good that we had just gone on that girls' trip. And it's like, I haven't seen you since the last time we were all in Portland together, but it doesn't
Hmm.
mean that our friendship is any less than just because I'm not
Hmm.
able to like get happy hour with you once a week. It's like,
Hmm.
it's the kind of friendships where you can kind of pick up where you left off and have those deeper meaningful conversations, and it does take time. I would say, if you're going 5+ years without speaking to someone, then maybe that's not a
Yeah.
friendship you have anymore, but
Yeah.
you don't have to be like constantly texting or talking to people. And I think that's why, at least for me, I like seeing people in person, and that's why when we all decided to do that, it was such a great thing for us to just all be together and have that
Hmm.
time. So don't think
I
that
think it's good
that's
stuff.
not a thing.
Okay, good. I did want to ask you, like, do you feel like because now you have a stable like income and a job that it's a lot easier for you to visit your friends and keep those relationships? Because it was hard in college when like you had like your high school friend that moved away, like getting the money to visit or a place to stay was a lot harder back then.
Yeah, I think it's easier and harder at the same time because while
Mm,
you have the financial means to like book a flight or a hotel or an Airbnb or whatever, like now that we all have jobs, so annoying, like we to like have PTO, and some people have like I have a very particular schedule of when I can like go
hmm.
out of town, and like everyone's kind of doing their own thing and have their own niche. So that's why I think it does take having the right friends that can like, communicate. Like if you're sending a message in a group text and what dates work for you and no one's responding, it's probably not going
Oh
to
my
work
God.
out. But
Yeah.
I think yes and no, like it's easier in the way that it's like, yeah, I can afford to go to San Diego for a weekend, but you know, time wise, people get very wrapped up, I think, in their own lives and their personal lives and don't always see the benefits of, taking that time to go and see someone that they haven't in a while. And those are
Hmm.
usually the people that aren't unable to keep those long distance friendships. So it's always something I've valued. And I feel like the people that I'm friends with also value it. And the ones
Hmm.
that don't, I've cut out of
You
my
cut
life.
them up?
Cut them up, baby. No, cut them out. So, I mean, it'll become obvious. Like, I'm sure you have other friends that maybe from U of A or in Portland that I don't know how often you see them, but if you're making the effort and you see that they're not, then have
Hmm.
a conversation with them. And if they're unable to like see what you're saying or get mad about it, then that's maybe when you can reevaluate a friendship. But I've had people come up to me and say, "Are we still friends? Like, I haven't seen you." And I'm like, it's a two-way street. Like, have you last time you messaged me on my birthday? Like, that's not, a friendship. So I have no problem
That's,
if someone calls me out for it, but I think people should be like able to, like I should be able to call you and say, Alex, like, why don't you want to go on a trip with us anymore? And if you can look in
yeah.
my face and say this is why, then okay. But I think it's very obvious. Like people show their true colors when it comes to those
Hmm.
things.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see what else you come out with. Would love to come back on the best podcast out there on all Spotify, whatever channels you're on. I don't know. That's where I listen. I listen on Spotify.
Yes, I think we will have you back for a mental health all topic related
Mm-hmm.
episode. I've been in therapy. I know you kind of touched on some of your issues.
Hmm.
That's going to be a much deeper topic, so we're going to have to really plan that out. But
Yeah.
yes, having
Yeah.
you back. If you're comfortable and you want to share your Instagram handle, feel free.
Oh yes. Mazalex, Mazalex is my Instagram handle. And my TikTok's boring. Don't worry about it.
I'll link it, don't worry. Well, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time. And I feel like I got to know you better. I didn't know some of those little stories. So every time
Yeah,
we talk, I feel like I learned so much more about friends I've had for years. But that's why it's
I
fun
love
to
it.
do things like this. So, yes, go and follow Alex on Instagram. And if you do not already, follow us on TikTok and Instagram at What the Frick Podcast. And I will see you guys next week.